Did you know that Jesus Christ had a brother? And no, I'm not talking about Craig. Yeah, thank you, Stephen Lynch. That song was absolutely hilarious. I am talking about this guy, Hong Xiuquan, the Chinese brother of Jesus Christ that led a rebellion in the mid-1800s that killed millions of people. Now, okay, I can understand the look of confusion that is on your face, so let me just have a moment here to set the stage. You see, Hong here was born into a peasant family in the early 1800s. Having received a very strong classical education, the goal that he had was to pass the imperial examinations. Now, these formal imperial examinations were part of the greater tradition of upward mobility in imperial China. The basic idea of it was that you had a very small percentage of people who would succeed in passing these very tough, very lengthy exams. If you did so, then you were going to have the opportunity to join the bureaucracy, and maybe, just maybe, you would end up working at the imperial court itself and serving the emperor. The only problem is, when I say that few people passed, I mean few. We're talking 1 in 100 people passed this test. And Hong, unfortunately, was not that one. You see, he had failed these exams twice previously, and with his third setback in 1837, he plunged into a nervous breakdown and fell into a feverish coma for several days. In a feverish state, Hong hallucinated a journey to the Heavenly King of the East, where his father revealed that demons were destroying humankind, and wielding a special demon-slaying sword, Hong, with the help of his brother, fought the demons and the King of Hell. Following this battle, Hong remained in heaven and took a wife, later having a child together. Eventually, Hong returned to Earth, receiving the title Heavenly King, Lord of the Kingly Way. But from the perspective of Hong's family, none of this actually happened. Instead, he had been in bed for days, stricken by fever, randomly jumping out of it to scream about demons, or that he was the Emperor of China, or singing. But when he did wake up, he told his family about the experiences that he had, copying down the poems that he had written supposedly while in heaven and distributing them among the people of his village, who promptly thought that he had gone insane. For years, nothing really happened, and so he put all of this behind him and instead focused once again on trying to pass the civil servant exams, which didn't happen. But in 1843, everything changed. You see, it was then that he was inspired by some writings that he had received from Christian missionaries, pamphlets that were talking about Jesus Christ. Hong, after reading these pamphlets, became convinced that the father that he had seen in his visions was in fact God, the older brother, Jesus Christ, and that made him the brother of Jesus. Hong now believed that he was the literal Son of God. Not only that, but it was his mission and that of his followers to cleanse China of the evils that were plaguing it. And in doing so, they would create the Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace. And he was going to make this Kingdom of Great Peace through great bloodshed. Yay. Hong revealed his dream to his relatives and other people, over time converting more and more people to his followers who would go and share his message among the people of China. Eventually, he and some of his followers took to the road, selling things like ink and brushes and other things to fund their travels, just so that they could spread the message more. And it was during these journeys that Hong began to write a lot more things himself, such as the exhortations to worship the one true God, pamphlets that would be spreading his message around the country to convert even more people into his followers. But at first, this wasn't going to be enough. Hong eventually returned home to support his family and work on further pamphlets, but his disciples still traveled, vigorously spreading his ideas and forming a group known as the Bai Shang Hui, or the God-worshipping Society. Now, the interesting thing here is that many of these followers were actually members of the Hakka people. The Hakka were a minority that were treated as something different from regular Chinese society. They were not a part of the Han majority, and so usually they were regarded as nothing more than destitute laborers on the outskirts and fringes of society. And because of that, his message was far more receptive to them. You see, Hong preached an early form of what you could call communism. Essentially, property was going to be communally shared and everything would be distributed equally amongst the people, with these economic ideas being mixed with the legal and social ideas of the Ten Commandments of Christianity. And in China, the promise of free land would soon bring in thousands of more followers. Of course, as the movement grew, the Qing authorities did not exactly take kindly to this and tried to step in and arrest some of its leaders. But it didn't really work. By 1849, the God-worshipping society had expanded into 4 areas of China, which Hong treated as the kind of strategic points in his upcoming battle against demons. Demons that Hong, mind you, would soon reveal to be the Qing dynasty itself. And the whole time that this was happening, Hong's control over his followers and their religious and social beliefs kept on tightening. Calling himself the Taiping King, he decreed that all men and women were to be separate, no sexual relations. Anyone that defied him would be beaten. And in 1850, that next year, Hong, stating that Jesus had told him to fight for heaven, began to arm his followers into military units to gradually take the country. Soon, these god worshippers were buying up massive amounts of gunpowder and organizing themselves into military ranks. By the next year, in 1851, Qing and god-worshipping forces were clashing. And unexpectedly, the Taiping forces were actually victorious in these first few battles. And over the next few months, fighting would continue until Hong would go on to declare the founding of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. And that now was the first year of a grand new era of God's kingdom on earth. The rebellion was now in full swing. And so later that year in 1851, Hong and his forces, now numbering 60,000, left their hideouts and began attacking cities, including taking the settlement of Yang'an. And it was here that Hong dominated the lives of his religious followers, not only controlling each and every single aspect of their lives, but also giving his own family royal titles. Hong declared that his followers should not commit adultery or be licentious, that they should reject the cast of amorous glances, the harboring of lustful thoughts about others, the smoking of opium, and the singing of sexual songs. If you detracted from this, then you were punished with beheading. But despite the fact that you couldn't sing a dirty song without being beheaded, Hong's followers still continued to grow. And by 1852, his forces now numbered around 2 million men, with the cities of Tianjin and Nanjing having fallen to him. At this point, the Taiping seemed to be unstoppable. That is, of course, until they tried to take Beijing. With the Taiping's failure to take Beijing, they now moved on to the defensive, instead concentrating their forces around Nanjing and trying to build an administration there. Over the course of the next 11 years, the Taiping would control Nanjing. Hong would step back from most secular matters of governance, instead leaving that work to others who would very soon slip into decadence that conflicted with Taiping religious ideals. The very same decadence and corruption of the Qing which they claimed to be fighting. And this would mark the beginning of their decline and the ultimate destruction of the Taiping. Over time, the Qing would reform their army, and Western powers would support them in order to gradually begin to take back the land that was occupied. Hong was eventually found dead in May of 1864, having been poisoned, though whether this was suicide or whether it was murder, we don't really know. But Nanjing itself was put under siege and fell simply a few months later. The Taiping occupiers were massacred, with some of them gathering in crowds and immolating themselves. Hong's son was named the new King of Heaven, but this was not to last, and he was very soon executed. So ended the story of Jesus' Chinese little brother. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This has been Stakuyi with the History of Everything podcast YouTube channel. Make sure to put your comments down in the comment section below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, everything on this video to help it in the algorithm, and I will see you all next time. Again, make sure to put your comments below. Let me know what we should do next. Bye, guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.